guys? Welcome back to channel ANDERZÉN. Today's video is going to be all about the 1-year update on the manual swap for the C55. This swap was completed, officially uploaded to YouTube on October 6th, and I think we spent 2 weekends on it, so it kind of finished around late September and early October. So it is now December of 2021. That was 2020 when that took place. So it's been a little over a year that it's been manual swapped. So I figured now would be a good time to kind of cover all the bases of what was my overall experience with it, what was the total cost, what are my recommendations for anyone wanting to try this, and was it all worth it? So we'll start off with, was it worth it? Now to me, and this is going to be a very subjective question, but for me, it was definitely worth it. This is a car that I plan on keeping for my life. Pretty much. I don't ever plan on letting this thing go. And I was at the point where I just missed driving manual so much that I was considering selling the car because I wanted everything that car had, the C55, but I just missed driving manual too much. And I was seriously contemplating selling it. But I just couldn't really ever push myself to do it. And I knew that I would probably regret selling it if I did. And I'm glad that I didn't. But about a year after I had been contemplating that is when I stumbled upon Dimitri's post about manual swapping his CLK 320 convertible. And then soon after I found his post and all of his information, I think I connected with him. And then shortly after that is when I found Alex's video, Jig Jacks, on manual swapping his E55. So those two lovely peoples and good friends now kind of gave me the confidence to be able to go for it. And I figured with all of the acquired experience that I had gained over the years of working on the car and working on Mercedes in general, I had like the skill set and experience and tools and availability and all that stuff. Plus I have the legend of, my stepdad Mike, who can pretty much fix anything. So yeah, I felt like I was ready to take it on. And for me, that's the biggest reason why it's worth it, because it allowed me to keep this car and fully turn it into what I wanted for my ideal, like kind of perfect car to have. And I can't overlook the other reasons why for me as well. Just looking at like the opportunities that came after completing all of the manual swap, the sponsorships, experience of connecting with different people that are in that kind of realm of heavily modifying cars or Mercedes in any way of that shape or form. And the other part that was really exciting for me, because I'm a big researcher and I love just finding out new information and learning. That is probably the coolest part about it, was just like being able to piece all of the little things together and complete the puzzle at the end. The challenge of that was very rewarding. So that's another reason why it was definitely worth it for me. Moving on to the cost. In total, the cost was about right under $1,600. I believe I calculated it before, it was around $1,594 and some cents. My goal before I started the project was for it to be under $1,500, and I got very close to that, obviously, and I definitely could hit under that mark. Having the experience, if I played it all over again, easily could do that. I think I could get it under 1,000, honestly, with the experience that I have now, because a lot of that expense ended up being parts that weren't used. But I don't regret buying those parts because they're a stockpile for future possible projects or manual swaps. So yeah, I don't regret buying any of that stuff, because it's gonna get used some way or somehow. But yeah, like things like the shift linkage and all the drive shafts. I think I bought 3 or 4 drive shafts, 3 or 4 shift linkages, and those are all ranging from like $80 to $150 a piece. So that's a good chunk of change right there that I could have avoided spending. The two biggest components, or most expensive components, were the transmission itself, and the flywheel actually was most expensive. The transmission was a great deal. I got it with 36,000 miles for $350. And the flywheel I bought from FCP Euro for $600, I believe. And it was obviously lifetime warranted. So if it ever goes bad, I can send it back to FCP and they'll, return one back to me. So that's a great deal in my mind. So I had a used flywheel that I could have used, but it just wasn't worth it. If you're gonna tear into the car and go through all the trouble of, you know, swapping out everything, I wanted everything to be as new as possible. The updated dual mass flywheel from the W204, what I got was a good deal in my mind as far as cost goes. Everything else was pretty inexpensive, to be honest. The pedal assembly was about $80. All of the little components like the lines and the bolts and hardware and springs and everything like that was about a $190, $200 order from the MB parts wholesalers. I believe at the time I was using mostly mbpartslive.com. They're based out of Pleasanton, California. And I just did that for the simple fact that they were one of the shops closest to me, or one of the closest wholesalers. There's also like MB Parts of Oregon and MB Parts, or OEM MB Parts or something like that. I think one of those I use more nowadays, but yeah, at the time I was using MB Parts Live. So shout out to them. They were super helpful. I got on the phone with them multiple times to explain to them what I was doing and just let them know like, hey, this is not going to be for a certain VIN number. I'm using it to manual swap the car, and they were totally cool about it and super helpful. So yeah, shout out to them. Other things to note, my overall experience with it since I've had it, it's pretty much been nothing but fun, but there were a few hiccups along the way, definitely. And most of those, and we'll get into this in a bit, but most of those were due to the factory shift linkage. But overall, like, they were either, you know, user error, like my fault of experimenting with certain things, or it was just the shift linkage and trying to match it up with the vehicle and, you know, anything. But most of it was just user error and my experimentation. So like, for instance, me trying out the polyurethane bushing that goes onto the shift linkage connecting to the trans. It was just way too harsh. It didn't go at all as I had planned. It made the car like terrible to drive. So that was something that went wrong. The biggest thing that wasn't really user error was me experimenting with the transmission fluids. Now, I didn't think transmission fluids could affect a manual that much when they're all like relatively the same spec or very similar fluids, but for whatever reason, the Valvoline synchro mesh just didn't do very well in the cold. It was totally fine once the car got warmed up, but yeah, it was really harsh going into second gear in the cold. Then I switched to Redline MT90. It might have been a little bit better. I don't think it was, to be honest. It was still harsh in the cold for second gear. And then finally, after a lot of searching around and looking up on forums and watching videos, etc., I found out that people were using the factory fluid with great results. So I picked up the Phoebe fluid, which is what the factory is, off FCP Euro, and it's really cheap, actually cheaper than the other options by far. And it is by far the best option. No hard cold shifting. Like maybe if it's really cold, the first maybe shift in the second gear of the day might be a little bit notchy, but no grinds like it was before, and very smooth overall. So anyone else who has done this, if you guys have fluid recommendations, it's going to depend on your climate. If you're not in the cold, you could probably use anything. You could probably use, you know, automatic fluid. You could use all kinds of stuff, but if you're anywhere in the cold, I would recommend using that Phoebe fluid or the factory fluid. So yeah, that goes into recommendations overall. The biggest thing I can advise you guys right off the jump is just switch to the BMW shift linkage style from the get-go. It'll make your life so much easier. It'll make measuring to your specific trans tunnel, depending on what chassis you're doing this to, so much easier, because you can just cut a rod to length basically. They also make, I think Turner Motorsports or somebody makes an adjustable BMW shift linkage where you can basically size it out, and you know, they have different ranges that they can go to. So those would be a great option. But yeah, just overall, like once I switched to the BMW shift linkage, it just takes all the complication out of like the reverse cable adjustment and all that. It's just not a simple setup, and Mercedes could have done a better job on that definitely if they had a heavier focus on manual transmissions. Other recommendations I would advise, try to find like a completely junked manual car that you can just buy all of the parts from. You can see like Jig Jacks did that with the Crossfire. He was able to find like a whole car, took everything he needed and swapped it right over. The biggest thing you'll have to pay attention to is what bolt pattern you have for the flywheel. It depends on model year. They switched it over around like 2005, 2006, I believe, depending on your model. Yeah, it might be different for the V6s and V8s, but anyways, just keep an eye on that, what bolt pattern you have, what car you have, and then go out there and try to find as many of the parts as a whole as you can. Don't try to buy the whole swap kits that people are trying to sell now on eBay, because a lot of that stuff is just pieced together and overpriced. If you want the convenience factor, you can grab one of those, but I keep seeing them now for like $1,500. And I'm not saying that's a bad deal, but you can definitely find a better deal with more new parts than they will give you in those eBay swap kits, because those ones are all going to be used parts and they're not going to give you hardware most of the time. So yeah, something to consider. But all said and done, having abused the car as much as I have, having driven it to its limits most of the time I drive it nowadays, and just the enjoyment factor that I get out of it, I'm super happy with the manual swap since all of it went down. I think it's going to last for a long time, knock on wood, but I think if you drive it with some sense of care and you've done things properly, I think like any manual, I'll definitely have to swap out the clutch and flywheel sometime. But as far as the trans go, it's kind of my belief now, with seeing all of the experimentation that's out there with the Mercedes manual trans, I think they're very similar to the situation with the BMW 5 and 6 speeds out of the E36s and E46s, that though their ratings don't show it as far as ratings from factory, they're proving very powerful in many applications. There's a lot of ZF boxes that are capable of over 1,000 horsepower now, of holding that power. And even the 5 speeds from the E36s can hold a pretty good amount of power and last for a long time. So I think these MB trans are in a very similar situation right now, where people don't really know what the threshold is of them, but I think the threshold of 300-400 horsepower is no problem for them. I think it's like a walk in the park. So yeah, fingers crossed, of course, but we'll see as time goes on. But so far so good, and I'm very happy with all of the experience of this manual swap. And not to mention, just for me, how enjoyable the car is. And I just know now it's a car that I'm never gonna let go. We got a bond. Me and the car have a bond for life. So yeah, it's not going anywhere. And shout out to everybody who I've been able to connect with. I'm not even gonna start to name people, because there's so many people that I've connected with that are either fellow manual swappers of Mercedes or just fellow crazy modifiers of Mercedes and other platforms. But just huge shout out to all the people that have shown me love and I've been able to show love and connect with. And that's including all the companies as well, and the people that I've spoken with from those companies. So yeah, I hope in future these swaps continue to gain more and more attention, not for myself, to gain anything particularly from it, but I just want, because I love Mercedes so much and I'm an enthusiast, I want people to realize how capable these platforms are and how affordable they can be and DIY friendly they can be, so that more and more people can experience it. And if more and more people enter that market, then it allows more and more aftermarket sources to arrive and to have a chance at providing parts and positive experiences for people towards these cars and platforms. So yeah, that'll go ahead and wrap up my overall thoughts since the post 1 year of the manual swap. If you guys have any questions, please feel free. You guys know I always try to show love and answer any of the comments that I get. You can always DM me on Instagram or email me at anderzen.amg@gmail. For the rest of the video, you guys go ahead and enjoy a little rainy day drive that I had with the car recently. Nothing crazy, I couldn't really get any grip, so there's a few baby pulls, but mostly just enjoying the sights and sounds of a couple angles of the GoPros in the car. So yeah, you guys enjoy. I will see you guys on the next one. Peace. Bye.